For days, Israel's defenses have largely held up against Iran's missile attack.
It began in a flash. Sirens wailed, cities plunged into darkness, and flames lit up the sky like a warning from above. What once felt like distant tension suddenly exploded into undeniable reality. This wasn't just another skirmish. It marked the beginning of a whole new kind of war, one with deadlier weapons, higher stakes, and no room left for empty threats. It's not just rockets anymore, it's a full-on test of endurance, technology, and who's willing to cross the point of no return. And tonight, we're pulling back the curtain. Welcome to Strike Point. Iran has just launched its largest and most direct assault against Israel. Over 200 weapons, unleashed from its own soil in a single night. In just 2 hours, Iran fired more than 120 ballistic missiles and 70 armed drones in a perfectly synchronized blitz. This wasn't a message, it wasn't a proxy move. It was a thunderous, calculated strike aimed straight at Israel's core. A move that signals a dangerous shift in how conflicts in the Middle East are fought. Everything about this attack was deliberate. Missiles and drones were launched in tight waves, back to back, designed to stretch and confuse Israeli defense systems. This was the first time Iran openly fired its ballistic arsenal on such a massive scale, directly at Israel. Military experts around the world are calling this a game changer. The precision, the timing, the scale, it wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Every drone and every missile had a purpose. Critical infrastructure across Israel was in the crosshairs. This strike marks the most intense escalation between Iran and Israel in decades. No longer operating through shadow militias, Iran just stepped onto the battlefield, fully visible, fully armed. But the real shock wasn't just the size of the attack, it was where those missiles hit. The barrage began at exactly 10:40 p.m. local time. Almost instantly, air raid sirens blared across Israel's largest cities. Tel Aviv, Haifa, Ramat Gan, and Ashdod all faced waves of destruction as the night sky filled with incoming fire. Israel responded immediately, activating its elite missile defense systems, Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow 3. These were built for moments like this. But not all threats were stopped. Not this time. Over 190 weapons came screaming in from multiple directions, overwhelming radar and leaving defense crews scrambling. Unlike the usual scattered rocket fire from militias, this was a highly coordinated military assault aimed at urban centers, not border zones. And the goal? To strike directly at the heart of Israel's defenses. In the dead of night, families dove for cover as explosions rocked the cities. And when the dust began to settle, it became clear. Some missiles got through. In Haifa, a massive blast ripped through the port area, hitting a fuel tank and setting off a fire that painted the skyline in smoke and flame. First responders battled for hours to contain the damage. At Ramat David Air Base, one of Israel's key military sites, 3 missiles hit their mark. Hangars were damaged, supply lines were crippled, and the strike shook one of the country's most secure installations. In Tel Aviv, 2 missiles slipped past the shield and slammed into civilian buildings. The damage was real. Rescue crews worked all night pulling people from the rubble. For many, it felt like the front lines had arrived at their doorstep. These weren't random hits. This was a calculated attempt to cripple Israel's ability to strike back. Experts say the targeting was based on hard data, military logistics, fuel, infrastructure. Everything was chosen for maximum disruption. What's even more alarming is the tech behind these weapons. Iran didn't just throw firepower at Israel, it threw smart firepower. Among the missiles launched were the Zulfagar, Desful, and Fateh 110, missiles capable of changing direction mid-flight. These aren't just fast, they're intelligent. They maneuver, they adjust. They're built to beat even the most advanced interception systems like Iron Dome and Arrow 3. Each missile carried precision navigation, making every strike more deadly, more intentional. And before any of the missiles arrived, Iran released a fleet of kamikaze drones, designed to locate and disable radar stations and missile defense batteries. Some Iron Dome units were knocked out, clearing a path for the ballistic wave that followed. It wasn't just clever, it was rehearsed. This attack proves Iran isn't in practice mode anymore. It's deploying its most advanced tech with deadly intent, and the pressure on Israel has never been higher. For the first time in recent memory, Israel's elite defense network was pushed to its absolute breaking point. The sheer volume of threats forced the military to make brutal choices, which ones to intercept and which ones to let through. Iron Dome, the pride of Israel's short-range defense, was outnumbered. It couldn't handle everything. It had to prioritize the most dangerous threats or those heading toward dense civilian areas. According to top military analysts, that was Iran's plan all along: flood the system. Over 200 projectiles, all launched in tight succession, forced Israel to triage its response. And that raises one haunting question. If this was just the beginning, what's next? Systems like David's Sling and Arrow 3 jumped into action, but even they couldn't keep up. The skies were saturated, overwhelmed. Israel's layered defenses were pushed to the edge, forced to make split-second choices using live data just to survive the onslaught. It was a moment of truth, and the truth was clear. No matter how advanced your tech is, volume and timing can shake even the strongest shield. But beneath all the firepower and strategy, a much heavier price was being paid. This wasn't just about radar and rockets. The human toll was devastating. In the aftermath, 11 people lost their lives. Over 150 were injured, many fighting for survival in hospital emergency rooms. Tel Aviv and Haifa's major hospitals activated full crisis protocols, struggling to handle the flood of patients pouring in after the strikes. And the chaos didn't stop at the emergency wards. Fires raged across multiple cities. One of the most catastrophic explosions hit near the Haifa port, where a missile detonated a massive fuel tank. It lit up the night sky and triggered widespread blackouts. Thousands were left without power. In Tel Aviv, the metro system ground to a halt. Public transport shut down. Entire neighborhoods went dark. Roads were blocked off. Alarms echoed through the streets, and people were urged to stay indoors. Schools didn't open the next day. Businesses remained shuttered. This wasn't a drawn-out war. It was a single strike. A few hours of terror, and yet it brought an entire modern nation to a standstill. For the Israeli public, this was personal. It wasn't just a military clash, it was a reminder. That war doesn't only happen on front lines, it reaches living rooms, classrooms, and hospital corridors. And as the nation grieved and scrambled to recover, its leaders faced an impossible question. How should Israel respond? Most expected a swift retaliation, a strike for a strike. But that response never came, at least not right away. Instead, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the attack what it was: an open act of war. But rather than order an immediate counterattack, Israel paused. The nation looked west, to Washington. This wasn't hesitation, it was calculation. Behind closed doors, Israeli and US officials began urgent talks. Netanyahu knew that any move now could set the entire region on fire. But pressure was rising fast. Opposition leaders and military strategists weren't holding back. Many pointed fingers at Israel's own recent actions, specifically the controversial airstrikes in Syria and areas close to Iran. Some believed those moves may have been the spark that lit this explosion. Protests broke out in city centers. Citizens demanded accountability and answers. People weren't just angry, they were scared. Meanwhile, Israel's military stayed on full alert. Fighter jets remained airborne. Anti-missile systems stayed hot. No one knew if a second wave was coming. So for now, silence was the strategy. Not because Israel was weak, but because the next move had to be the right one. And while Israel waited, the region began to shift. Hezbollah in Lebanon raised its alert level and warned it would act if Israel hit back. In Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, Iran-backed militias mobilized. Fighters gathered, positions were fortified, everyone braced for what might come next. Back in Washington, the US made its position clear: full support for Israel. More defense systems were discussed. Warships in the region were put on high readiness. This wasn't just about protecting an ally anymore, it was about sending a message to Iran, to its proxies, to the world. Other players jumped in. Turkey and Qatar called for emergency peace talks. Russia and China pushed for a UN Security Council session. Diplomats scrambled, but no deal was struck, because by now, this wasn't just a two-player game. Iran had made its move, not through a militia, not through whispers, but with missiles, drones, and open fire. It was bold, it was defiant, and it changed the rules. The question now isn't just how Israel will respond, but how far the world is willing to go to prevent the next strike. Because this wasn't just an attack, it was a line crossed. And whatever comes next won't be like anything we've seen before.